Well, I'm going to pass it on to Brian, who's going to introduce our three speakers for tonight. And thank you all for showing up. This is a really great crowd. Awesome.
All right, so how many people have never been here before? Wow, all right, that's awesome. Glad you guys could make it. So we've got a pretty neat event going on tonight, a little bit different than our normal format. So normally we just have a single speaker, they come, they talk, a little bit of networking. Those of you who know me know that I'm pretty passionate about Ayn Rand's ideas, and one of the best ways to get those ideas out is getting books into kids' hands. So a friend of mine, Jason, who I'm going to introduce here in a second, one of the things he really focuses on is this ARI Books for Teachers program, and I'll let him tell you all the gory details. But tonight is a little bit of twofold. One is primarily a fundraiser for ARI, and it's specifically to raise money for the books in Colorado, and then also to hear from three different Defenders of Capitalism award winners. Now, for those of you who are not familiar with that, the Defenders of Capitalism is a project of the leadership program of the Rockies. So near the end of every class, 12 to 15 people-ish are picked as finalists, and they have to come in and basically give a 10 to 15-minute defense, and then pass a withering 10 to 15-minute Q&A section. Defending capitalism further. And most of you, or a lot of you, were here when Helen Raleigh gave her defense, and she was this year's award winner. So tonight, we're actually going to hear from three of the past award winners, and the first, who is going to be just kind of running the evening from now on, is the 2012 award winner, and that is Jason Ledman.
I'd like to thank Brian and Mike for inviting me to come and allowing me to do this fundraiser this evening. And I'd also like to thank Brian for saying about half of what I planned to say before I started introducing the speakers. Let me start by telling you a little bit more about the Books for Teachers program. It's a program that the Ayn Rand Institute put together about 10 or 15 years ago, where they said, if we can give free classroom sets of Ayn Rand's major works, mainly Anthem, The Fountainhead, and Atlas Shrugged, to any teacher who requests it, along with a teacher's guide, we can really influence the culture. And the program has been wildly successful. In fact, nationwide, they have distributed over 400,000 books for the last several years. Now, in Colorado alone, they have a request for 7,000 books. And what I've done for the last several years is to try and raise enough money for ARI to be able to have the funds for those books. So I'm specifically trying to raise money for the Colorado Books for Teachers program so that it's fully funded from donations within Colorado by the people who love liberty here in Colorado. So one of the things that I'd like to do is give you a little bit of proof that this is actually something that is beneficial, something that is functioning and working. And we have someone here who is a beneficiary of the Books for Teachers program. And Mary Lynn, if you wouldn't mind standing up, or if you'd like to come up here and just talk a minute about your experience.
Hi, everyone. I'm Mary Lynn Maxalka, born and raised in Boulder County. I went to Boulder High, that bastion of free thought and libertarian ideals. And, oh, yes. Well, to make a long story short, Boulder High and the city of Boulder, I mean, we all know it really is that bubble surrounded by reality. And in high school, I was fortunate to have a teacher who had us read The Fountainhead for my language and composition class. And I had never heard of Ayn Rand. I'd never been exposed to her, and I had to read The Fountainhead the summer before that class started, and I was totally sucked in by the story, by the literary aspect of it. It's a beautifully written book. And after analyzing that book through my class that next summer, I bought Atlas Shrugged, Anthem, We the Living. I pretty much got my hands on every single Ayn Rand book I could get my hands on as a 17-year-old. And that has had a huge impact on my thinking ever since. And, you know, I was involved in leadership program of the Rockies this last year. I don't know that I would even be here if it wasn't for a teacher. I was the class president of 2013, best class ever. Thank you. But, you know, the proof is in the pudding. And like Jason said, this is proof that, you know, having grown up in Boulder County, which frankly is just hostile to a lot of the things that we believe in, if it was not for having a teacher put The Fountainhead in my hands, I don't know that I would be where I am today in terms of my thought and my stance on issues and on principles. So thank you, Jason, for letting me share that. But yeah, it works, you guys.
So we put together an evening with the 3 finalists of the Defenders of Capitalism, or the 3 award winners for the previous 3 years prior to Helen, so 2010, 11, and 12, to speak to you. If you believe in either the Books for Teachers program or you think we did a good job tonight, we would love for you to make a donation to the Colorado Books for Teachers program. What we would ask you to do is write a check to the leadership program of the Rockies and put in the memo that it's for the Books for Teachers program. I think Brian might be passing around a hat later, but I'll leave that up to him.
Just real quick announcement, if you don't have a check, we will be passing around a hat. We can take all the money, and then Liberty on the Rocks can write a check on behalf to this program. So if you'd rather do that, donate that way, we can.
So before I get into the Defenders of Capitalism speeches, I would like to bring up the founder of the Defenders of Capitalism program, Mike Williams, to talk a little bit more about the program.
Thanks, Jason. It's really good to be here. I'm really here to listen. You got 3 heroes of mine to present to you tonight. I appreciate the opportunity to say a few words about the leadership program of the Rockies. LPR is a program that is basically building an army for freedom. And yeah, that's right. It started off historically. It started off as the Republican leadership program, and frankly, I was a reject of that program. I was telling somebody the story earlier. It isn't partisan today. It's not a Republican program. We had Democrats, Independents, Republicans, Libertarians, people who love liberty, and I think I'm in the right crowd here with that little group. I started the Defenders of Capitalism program because the leadership program itself actually had Ayn Rand, the Atlas Shrugged, be part of their program as a required reading, but never had any real structure around it. And I added structure to it. So if you're a fan of Ayn Rand and you believe in the fact that more people should be exposed to her ideas or Atlas Shrugged, then you should be given to Jason's Books for Teachers program, and you should be supporting the leadership program. But I'm basically here to listen to the three of my heroes, and I want to thank Mike and Brian for letting me talk to you a bit. And I'll let Jason introduce the Defenders of Capitalism.
So when I was faced the decision of what order we should speak in, I didn't want anyone to think that we were playing favorites in any way. So we decided to do it chronologically. So in 2010, the winner was Cole Pfeiffer. When I asked him how I should introduce him, he said, well, you should say, I'm 5'10", like long walks on the beach and romantic sunsets. And I said, no, tell us something that they actually want to hear about. He said, well, I was the 2010 winner, and I was elected to the state assembly, and I currently work for Janus. And without any more than that, I would like to introduce Cole Pfeiffer.
Thanks, Jason. This is quite the underground setup. I feel like a comic up here or something, this is pretty incredible. Jason said if you appreciate the Books for Teachers, you should donate, or if you like the talent. So I'm here to first and foremost campaign for the Books and Teachers program, because I'm not sure how great the talent would be. So I won in 2010. I was awarded the Defender of Capitalism in 2010. And like Mike said, the really important thing to know out of the gate here is that there are 80 people that went through LPR with us. There's 80 people that went through this same program, talked about these same ideas, were able to debate and defend them. And I can tell you firsthand, there's not a big difference between me or any of the winners and the other 80 people. And this is a lot more about creating that army and that group, that network of defenders of capitalism, than it is about any sort of award winner. This is about having people out there defending capitalism on a daily basis. And it's my hope today that everybody in this room will leave a part of that network, that every one of you will leave as a defender of capitalism this evening, and you'll be more excited and enthusiastic about defending these principles on a daily basis, and that you'll feel better prepared to do so. So defend capitalism. It's an interesting title, isn't it? Mike could have called it Experts of Capitalism. Tonight could be called Capitalism, a dissertation. But it's not. We're here to defend capitalism, which implies a little bit of action, doesn't it? It implies that capitalism is under attack. And I'm assuming that this group of people believes that capitalism is, in fact, under attack. And so if we're going to be defending it, we got to remember the great Art of War quote, right? Know yourself, but know your enemy, and you need not fear the result of 100 battles. So who's the enemy? Who's attacking capitalism? The first and most important question. And I was watching, so the other day I was watching YouTube, and it was an old one, had Barney Frank. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, like, I get like goosebumps. You know, I get like, I'm convinced he's just going to rip back his face and this like evil creature is going to come out like, you know what I mean? And so for me, it's like, that's the guy. That's who we gotta take down right there. All right. Like, I've solved the mystery, call off the dogs. Let's go get it. And maybe there's somebody like that for you. Maybe it's Barack Obama. Maybe it's Nancy Pelosi. Maybe it's a system. Maybe it's K through 12 education or academia. Or maybe it's just the machinery of the federal government. But I'm here to tell you that even excluding what I just said about Barney Frank, I don't know that any of those are the true attackers of capitalism. I think those are actually symptoms of an attacker that is much quieter and much harder to defend against. I believe that capitalism is actually under attack in the minds of the majority of the American people. And what I mean by that specifically is I believe that the majority of the American people now believe that socialism is more moral than capitalism. And if you don't listen to anything else I'm going to say, and I promise you'll hear this from my two counterparts, but please hear this. Capitalism is under attack on moral grounds. And so if we're going to defend capitalism, we got to do two things. One, we got to fight the real attacker. We got to be out there in the trenches. This is about in the dining rooms and in the living rooms and in the family rooms, in the cars and the workplaces. We're going after the majority of the American people's minds here. But secondly, we've got to get moral. And let me give you an example of what I'm talking about and why that's so important. This is the argument that's being made. This is the moral argument. You've heard it 100 times. You've probably heard it today. It sounds something like this. Look at Company X. At Company X, the CEO makes 250 times what the janitor makes. And the CEO's got houses and cars and everything else he's got. It's awesome. And the janitor's got diabetes, and he cannot pay for the education of his 3 young girls. It's wrong. Vote for me, and I will fix it. That's a moral argument, and it's an effective one, right? It gets in my heartstrings a little bit. And what do? We make a mistake. And I don't know about everybody in this room. It seems like a good group. But what you'll often hear from the people proposing the counter-argument is an effectiveness argument. Great moral argument. This is what they'll say. They'll go, oh, yeah, but if you take money from the guy at the top, you take it from him, and over time he's not going to have as much to invest, and he's not going to be as innovative. Or, hey, you give it to the guy at the bottom, and that creates serfdom, road to serfdom, and over time, trust us, we'll create longer-term prosperity. That's the counter-argument right now. Great moral argument. Long-term effectiveness argument. And the longer that happens, every day we lose more and more Americans, and every day the attacker of capitalism gets bigger and bigger. So we have to evolve that argument, and we've got to be fighting this on a daily basis. So how do we do it, right? That's what we got to do. But how do we do it? There's a lot of ways, and I guarantee you that the two gentlemen coming after me will be better. But the way I like to think about it is these two things. Angels with guns. That's what they're arguing for. That's what they think's more moral, right? Angels with guns. And let's unpack each of those one at a time. What do I mean by guns? I told you we were going to have to fight this thing in the living room. So let me take you there. And I've got a gentleman open carrying in front of me, so I'm going to use him just because, we're talking about guns. So I'm sure every one of us has been around that dining room table or that living room, right? Maybe it's extended family. Maybe it's friends. And some of these kind of arguments start to find their way in, right? It's getting a little political, and you start hearing stuff about, oh, they don't have health insurance, or it's just Peyton Manning makes so much money, somebody's got to go take the money from him. You can't make that much money, right? You start to hear these moral arguments seep in, and you know where that's leading their minds. So now it's your turn to propose the argument, right? So this is what I'd encourage you to do. I encourage you to take out the real gun if you got it, but maybe the fake one in your hand, and say, let's assume I've got one. And point it across the table at whoever you'd like. And say, stand up or I'll shoot you. So they stand up, right? You say, cluck like a chicken, or whatever random shit you like. But do cluck like a chicken, or I'll shoot you. And so they do that, and they say, sit down, or I'll kill you. And then pose the question to the table. Say, is what I just did moral or immoral? Did I just act morally or immorally? And it's going to be pretty clear, even to the typical American today, that you just committed an immoral act. You can't do that. You'll ask them why. They'll say something like, you can't point a gun at people, you can't take away their liberty, you can't make them do something, you can't force somebody to do something. But that principle of individual liberty still exists. Take the rabbit hole deeper for them, though. And now ask the question to the group, well, how many people think that as a human being I should take care of myself? How many people think that the right thing to do is to work out and try to be healthy, right? That's what we should do as a person. Everybody should do that, right? And the vast majority of people at that table will say, yeah, that's the right thing to do. So take your gun back out and point it back across the table and say, hey, sir, I'm so high and you weigh a little bit more than I do, and so I think you got to do some push-ups. So stand up or I'll kill you. Ask him to get down, give me 20 push-ups or I'll kill you. And then have him sit down or I'll kill you. And then you can let him know, the reason I did that is the vast majority of us just believe that you should take better care of yourself, and so I'm looking out for you, and you're welcome, right? That's sort of the principle there, right? And then you can propose the argument back to the table. You can say, did I just commit a moral or an immoral act? And it'll go sideways on you. Everybody's going to blow up. I've actually done this, so I can tell you that from experience. But you'll have made your point, right? You'll have made the point that individual liberty is a moral principle. And that no matter what the majority believes, no matter what the morality of the majority is, it is still immoral to take individual liberty when you don't need to. Right? And we know that capitalism functions on voluntary exchange. I don't think anybody's boss here pointed a gun at them to work. I didn't point a gun at my customers today to buy from me. We all get to interact through individual liberty, and capitalism is the only structure on the planet that maximizes that. Socialism, collectivism, communism, whatever you want, whatever's outcome-based, can only work if it controls all the resources and controls the entire economy, which means it must control people. And the only way it controls people is through force and coercion, or in other words, the point of the gun. So that's the first one, right? The gun. And no matter what policy, we can always turn back to that and make the right proposed counter-argument. But the other one is angels. And James Madison's got a great quote, right? He says that if men were angels, no government would be necessary. But if angels governed men, no internal or external controls on government would be needed. And I've got really good news for this group of people. The socialists and the collectivists making these arguments have cut a huge corner. They've been extremely lazy. And in so doing, they've laid a massive bear trap for themselves to step in. Like lemmings with a great deal of hubris, they've walked up to the cliff. And with the flick of a finger, we can send them over. I'm going to represent this the way the argument's usually made to me. And I'm not trying to patronize the younger generation. I'm part of that younger generation, so I'm just giving you some of my friends. But this is what the argument usually sounds like. It's something like, it's the corporations, man. They own everything, right? It's 1%. They're maximum. All they care about is their cars, and they're out there, and it's greed, bro. That's what it's greed. It's wrong. It's wrong. And so you can go, whoa, I had no idea. That sounds awful. Tell me, my stoner friend, what company are you talking? I mean, you are describing a pretty horrific person, right? Who is this individual? We got to go get him. We got to fire him. We got to stop buying from the company. All of them. Everybody, right? Everyone is in that camp, my man. They have made the argument that all of these human beings, every one of them self-interested. Every one of these human beings out there that exist are looking out for themselves first. They're going to seek their own safety, their own happiness. They're going to care about their kids more than yours. Those are the evil human beings out there. So are you ready for the flick of the finger? Mr. Obama, aren't you a human being? Hey, Nancy Pelosi, aren't you a human being? Isn't the entire federal government, every regulatory agency, every capital in this entire country made up of human beings? And I tell you what, I think we've got some statistics here. In 2008 and 2009, does anybody know the number one housing market performer, right? Everything was falling off a cliff. There was one market that was positive during that 2-year period, the metropolitan of Washington, D.C. There are 3,000 counties in the United States, a little bit more than that. And there are six out of 3,000. That's 0.5%, not 1%, the evil 0.5%, right? And 6 of those counties have a median income above $100,000. In the entire country, there's only 6. 4 of the 6 are Fairfax, Loudoun, Fall Church, and Howard County. Those are literally the counties that make up the beltway of Washington, D.C. And the final one is kind of the cornerstone of this argument of theirs, right, is income inequality. You've heard about how bad it's getting. It is bad out there. And the way they usually look to measure that is they take the 5% of income owners at the top relative to the 5% of income owners at the bottom, and they get a ratio. Well, as of 2012, does anybody know the number one state for wealth inequality, the number one income inequality state? You guessed it, the District of Columbia. It would seem that somewhere there's some overhead, right? They are making an argument that this group of human beings in a capital structure is going to be self-interested. But move them over into this group, and they are totally morally pure. And it does not exist, and every one of our counterparts and every one of our Americans out there know it doesn't exist. So those are my 2 favorite, right? Angels and guns. If we keep that in mind, we can make the moral arguments to a fairly dense populace in a very quick fashion like they do, and start to win back the principles of capitalism. And to prove it's true, I'll give you just a really quick story, all right? I'm from Douglas County. My parents live in Douglas County, and we've had a pretty heated school board election, if anybody's been following it. There's been 4 reform candidates going up against 4 union candidates, and the union threw big dollars behind it. And the teachers were out, and they had the slogan, 4 candidates, 4 kids, moral argument. And my mom got called by one of the teachers, and she said, hey, I just want to make sure we can count on your vote for kids, moral argument. And my mom said, well, I'll be voting for the reform candidates. And she said, well, don't you care about the children, right? Moral argument. And my mom got caught into some sort of thing about merit-based pay and whether or not it works for teachers. Effectiveness, right? She made that mistake. And she called me afterwards, and she was really upset. And she's upset, really, 1, because she didn't make a good case, and 2, because she didn't like that her morality was in question here by her friend. And so I start telling her this, angels and guns, Mom, it's in there somewhere. We can find the case for it, right? So Sue is the teacher's name. She calls my mom back, probably assuming that she was teetering a little bit. And she invites my mom and dad to dinner. And what I'm about to share with you is recounted through my father. About at the dessert course, Sue said to my mom, well, have you thought any more about it? Do you know how you're going to vote? And my mom said, yeah, I think I'm going to vote with the kids. Specifically, I think I'm going to vote with the kids' right to choose something as important as their own education. I'm sick of watching the plight of these poor inner-city failing schools, and I'm tired of watching the government force people to continue to go through the cycle of crime, poverty, poor education, crime, and poverty. And lastly, I have no idea why any of you trust some bureaucrat in Washington or some person at the State House or some dude on a school board to care more about my kid than I do. And apparently the quote from the teacher was, why don't we just talk about something else? I'm here to tell you today that it's totally possible. Everyone in this room knows that capitalism leads to longer-term prosperity. It's our job, and I invite you into it, to go out and remind Americans that not only does it lead to longer-term prosperity, it's also more moral. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Cole. In 2011, the Defender of Capitalism award winner was Rich Bratton. Rich is an interesting guy. He actually has the wherewithal to go through and read all of the potential legislation and rank it according to the principles of liberty. And in fact, he has a website called The Principles of Liberty where he ranks all of the Colorado legislature according to criteria about does it respect property rights, et cetera, et cetera. He's also director, I've forgotten the exact title, of the RSCC, and he is very well versed in Colorado politics. So please welcome Rich Bratton with his presentation. The man brought props. Would you like the...
What a great group. Would you be my neighbor today? I am Rich Bratton. I'm also from Douglas County, and we did win that school board race. Thank you very much. It was a great effort by a lot of people, and we did win on a moral argument because it is for the children, and it's not for the unions. As a famous, I can't remember the guy's name, the union leader once said, who basically grew the national unions for teachers. He said, I'll start representing kids when kids start paying union dues. I mean, that is a quote you can look up. So it's not about the kids for the unions. So anyway, I'm going to start the little game. Do you know rock, paper, scissors? All right, we're going to practice. All right, because this is total audience participation. So everybody count both hands. Most of us have them. Most. All right, here we go. You do this, you go rock, right, paper, and scissors, right? Okay. All right, so let's try it one more time. Let's just try it once. Ready? Rock, paper, scissors. We're going to go 3. 1, 2, 3. All right, so we're going to do it on 3. That's what I was going to check, see, because some of us do 3 in there. One more time. 1, 2, 3. All right, here we go. I have 3 props. And this first prop is $1,500 in cash with these green pieces of paper. Federal Reserve, they used to be Federal Reserve notes, so no longer that. But anyway, so $1,500 here is prop number 1. Okay? Cold hard cash. Boy, the volunteers really come out of the woodwork. The next prop here, you see what this is? It is a golden coin, 1 ounce, pure gold, 99.9 whatever, Dove Bar Cure or Ivory Soap, right? Remember that, 99.75? All right, a 1 ounce of gold. You want to check it out? Don't bite on it. All right. If you're interested in what a gold coin looks like, you can see me after. Actually, I'm going to have you hold that. And I'm going to set the cash here. So, about $1,400 here. That's worth about $1,400 right now, 1 ounce of gold. I also have here a very fine piece of machinery. This is a Kimber custom shop gold combat stainless steel. It's my favorite 1911 weapon. In deference to the ownership here, it's tied back, so worth used at least, about, we'll call it $1,400.
Rich, I'll go ahead and hold that one for you.
Okay. Actually, I'll have my concealed carry, or my open carry friend. You can hold that one.
Monopoly.
All right, here we go. He's the state. All right, so here's what we're going to do with our rock, paper, scissors. We have a gold coin, about $1,400, or $1,400 in cash here. We have a fine piece of machinery there. It's worth about $1,400. When we go rock, paper, scissors, we're going to point at one of those 3. If you could have one of those 3, which would you choose? Ready? Here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right, everybody think about what you chose. I'm going to take it back now.
Did you point at the color?
All right, so just keep that exercise in mind just because we're going to come back to that. Because the question is going to be, what went through your mind when you were making your choice? So let me give you a quote, and see if you can guess who said this. By liberty, I understand the power which every man has over his own actions and his right to enjoy the fruits of his labor, art, and industry, as long as he hurts not the society or any members of it. not from taking from any of those members or hindering them from enjoying what they want to enjoy. The fruits of a man's honest industry are the just rewards of it, and they're ascertained to him by natural and eternal equity, as is his title to use them in the manner in which he sees fit. And thus, every man is the sole lord and arbiter of his own private actions and property. Who do you think said that? Any guesses? Bastiat. John Stuart Mill. John Lott. Hayek. Jefferson. Great. I was waiting for founding fathers. Good. All great. All great guesses. No, it's not Barack Obama. Folks, these ideas aren't new. Liberty and freedom are based on a moral code, and it's nothing new. This was over 2,000 years ago in 75 BC by Cato the Younger. These aren't new ideas. This freedom, right, and this property rights. The Declaration of Independence, of course, says we hold these truths to be self-evident. All men are created equal. We're endowed with inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Of course, we know that one of the drafts was property. Bastiat was definitely one I'm going to quote next. Life, liberty, and property do not exist because men have made laws. On the contrary, it's the fact that life, liberty, and property existed already that the laws were made. Now, here comes the test, and this is Bastiat, and this is exactly what Cole was saying. Here comes the test. I use this all the time, too. And this is Bastiat again, quote, see if the law takes from some persons what belongs to them and gives to other persons to whom it does not belong. See if the law benefits one person at the expense of another by doing what the citizen himself could not do without committing a crime. Right? If I stick my gun in her ear and say, give me $20 because Jason needs a new jacket, or that guy on the street needs a donut, or whatever, that's immoral. If it's immoral for me, why is it moral for the government to do that? Right? And that's exactly what Cole was saying before. So theft is a violation of our rights, of our very being. And as Shakespeare said, a rose by any other name is still a rose, right? Theft by any other name is still theft. So government basically takes. It doesn't produce. It takes, and it redistributes. And it does so at the point of a gun. It's immoral for us to do it, but somehow it's moral for the government to do it. Here's the question. Why do we, as free citizens, allow this to happen? Because I would submit that we're all contributing to the problem if we're not standing up and fighting this issue. And it's easy to get suckered into it, right? It's easy. We all want to help people, right? Many of us do anyway, but maybe not Jason. But we all want to help people, right? Jason was like, oh no, man. I'm thinking that gold coin was pretty cool. All right, but so some people make themselves susceptible to plunder because they just don't understand that that's what's going on. They haven't checked their premises, all right? They're asleep, and they've got to be woken up to this. That's what we've got to do a better job of doing, just like Cole said. The reason others make themselves susceptible to plunder by believing, and here's the big lie, that morality, right, being moral, requires self-sacrifice. And that is a premise that we buy. It's, in order to be good, I have to hurt myself somehow, because that makes me moral. Folks, that's a lie. All right? We can all talk about all of our charitable contributions and all the stuff we do, and we all do it because we want to, but it's our choice, all right? And we're not coerced by government to do it. Coercion, charity, government benevolence isn't that. It's coercion and redistribution. It is not moral to plunder people and redistribute. You're violating their person. So, but we can't go along with the lie. All right, so don't get sucked up into that. So the antithesis of this is capitalism, or the free markets. All right, capitalism is directly founded upon the morality of our individual rights, our rights to life, liberty, and property, and it's based on self-interest, folks. Self-interest is okay. All right? It's okay. It's not immoral to be interested in myself. What is the most motivating thing? If you've ever tried to get your kids to do something, right? What's the best way to do it? Get them to buy in. Get them to have a reason, right? Whatever the reason is, show them the money, fine. Whatever their self-interest is, you find those buttons, they're going to be much more cooperative with you as a parent, right? Everybody acts in their self-interest, and that's okay. That's what the free markets are based on. So rather than believe the lie that morality requires self-sacrifice, all right, let's assert the fact, all right, that our self-interest is good. And when we act in our self-interest, under the economic system of capitalism, we benefit everybody. Capitalism is the most moral economic system ever devised by man. It's required by liberty. And it requires liberty to exist. All right? They're symbiotic. Liberty and free markets go together. They cannot be separated. And when they are severed, you will lose them both. And that's what we're doing now. So, there's no greater lie than the fact that morality requires self-sacrifice. If you want to give, that's fine. But morality isn't based on self-sacrifice. I don't have to hurt myself to be a good person. Okay? Self-interest is good because it unleashes my motivation, it unleashes your motivation, and free markets are the only non-coercive economic system that's ever been devised. We only interact if we want to. It's not at the point of a gun, and it's all by choice. All right? And it's all because we act in our self-interest. So, let's bring it back to we'll wrap up here. Let's bring it back to the exercise we did. How many people chose the cash? Okay, got some hands? Cool. I hope somebody chose something of everything. How many people chose the gold? All right, a lot of people chose the gold. All right, how many people chose the gun? Dude, I love this group. All right. I'm partial to the gun. All right. Here's the exercise. Here's the point of that. There's not a right answer, right? I mean, to me there is, and to you there is, but there's not an absolute right answer here. To me, that paper, what good is it? It is a piece of paper, green ink, and we've been fooled into believing that thing, that stuff, is worth something in and of itself, and it's not. The gold, I mean, this is beautiful. I mean, people worked hard to dig this out of the ground. It's beautifully cast. It's really cool looking, and it certainly has value. But I, for the life of me, can't understand why it's worth X number of dollars on any given day. I can't eat it. I can't defend myself with it. Maybe once. All right? But somehow it magically keeps it stored because people believe it's worth something. You know, the gun, some people are like, oh, gun. To me, it's a finely crafted tool that is the perfect symbol of free markets because it is a finely crafted weapon which you can use to defend your property and your life. All right? So to me, it's a perfect symbol of capitalism, and so that's why I choose that one. But the point being, we all have different values, right? So what did you think when we were going through that? I know some of you were thinking, well, I know gold's really worth $14.75, so if I get the gold, I can turn around and I can get more cash with it, or I know I can get that gun for cheaper, and I'm going to arbitrage this, whatever. But think about what you thought about, and the question is, what's of value to you? And we all have different perceptions of that. That's what makes capitalism work. Because there's an infinite combination of those things, and what's valuable to you and me and somebody else, if we're allowed the freedom, all right, to have a free market, and we're allowed to act in our self-interest, then we will be able to trade, borrow, produce, and will be motivated to create these cool things, among others, right? iPhones, etc. And we will be less willing to put up with a government that wants to coerce us at the point of a gun in the name of morality and give our stuff to other people and completely demotivate us, right? So that is, to me, the moral case for capitalism and why we should all embrace it and come up with like Cole, and I can't wait to hear what Jason has to say, come up with good ways to express the morality of capitalism to other people. Thank you.
And now we come to an awkward moment in the evening where I get to introduce myself.
Chronological order, whatever.
So I won in 2012, and we were given the same question. Present a 10 to 15 minute speech on the morality of capitalism. Well, why is capitalism the only moral economic system? Well, as with anything, when you start talking about morality, you should look to a manifesto for a great quote to start off a speech. And I went to a manifesto. Anyone guess which one?
Capitalism.
Andrew Bernstein's Capitalist Manifesto. Here is the quote that I think epitomizes why capitalism is the moral economic system. Man cannot live unless he has an unqualified right to his own life, which means an unqualified right to the use of his own mind, to live accordance to his own judgment, to pursue his own values, and to retain the product of his own effort. I have several stories to share with you about how capitalism works and other systems really don't, according to this quote. So let's talk about the right to your own life. I'd like to tell you the story of a man named Morris Litvinov. He was a poor Jewish peasant in Russia. And he lived pretty much hand to mouth, lived through several pogroms where the Russians would come in, raid the village, rape the women, and leave. But one time, something was a little bit different, because instead of them being raided by the citizens, the army came in. And they said, we're fighting a war, and we need soldiers. But they didn't really mean soldiers. They meant cannon fodder. They meant we need people who are going to stand unarmed at the front lines and fight so that our soldiers can make it to the battle lines unharmed, to the front lines unharmed. Morris said, I may be poor, but I'm not stupid. And I know that I probably could live to 30 or 40 in this poor village, but if I get drafted into the army, I know that my life expectancy is a year, maybe two. And out of desperation, he did something that I literally cannot imagine. He ate a package of cigarettes, so that when they started going through all of the young men in the village saying, you, and you, and you, they looked at Morris and they said, wow, you're green and sick, and you won't even be able to stand. We don't want you. They passed over him and said, but we'll be back. And he did everything in his power to leave Russia. And he made his way to the United States, where at Ellis Island, he got his name changed from Lord Morris Litvinov to Morris Letman. He was my great-grandfather. Talk about the right to own your life. It didn't exist there. Not one bit. He didn't have any choice about whether he was going in the army, and he took such a drastic action that I imagine he probably almost killed himself eating those cigarettes in order to get to a place that does respect the right to own your own life. The next point I'd like to talk about is the right to act in accordance with your own judgment. And as part of the Defenders of Capitalism program, we read Atlas Shrugged and Economics in One Lesson. And I have an example from each of those, and then a third one that kind of relates to my own house. So from Atlas Shrugged, there's a moment when Hank Reardon realizes that there was a piece of legislation, the Equalization of Opportunity Act, which was going to force him to sell his subsidiary businesses. And after the bill was passed, he worked like a dog that day because he didn't want to think about it. And that night, he's sitting there at his desk, and he realizes that this took the choice of what he could do with his business away from him. He couldn't own the coal mines that helped him produce his Reardon steel. He couldn't own any ore mines. He couldn't own transportation. He had to sell off anything, and all of the decisions relating to his business were taken away from him. Talk about not being able to act on your own judgment. Another example, my wife is here in the audience, and last summer Teresa hired an intern. And this relates to a lesson from Economics in One Lesson about the right to be able to choose how much to pay someone. Well, she hired an intern, and she made the best case to her boss that, hey, we might be able to pay them something we should, but the minimum wage laws were such that they really couldn't afford to pay an intern to do what they were going to have them to do. And I remember several nights she would say, God, Rebecca is doing such a great job. And she's driving all the way down from Boulder to Kipling and 470 just to do this job. And I would love to pay her something. But we can't afford to pay her minimum wage. We just can't afford to do it. That choice was taken away from Teresa, and it was taken away from her employer. The fact is, the choice was either zero or minimum wage, but to pay her anything in between, that was taken away from her and her company. The last thing I'd like to tell you about being able to act on your own judgment. About a month ago, we had Roto-Rooter out to our house, and this is actually a frequent thing that we have to do. About every 6 months, we have Roto-Rooter out as preventative maintenance. And as I was talking to the guy about, what can we do? Is there anything we can do to kind of push this out to 9 months or 12 months because the sewer keeps getting kind of torn up? He said, no, not really. There's some chemicals you can put in, but they're banned. You can't use those. And by the way, I realize that this makes my speech the crappiest speech. And I'm sorry about that. And then I started saying, well, is there anything that could have been done? And they said, well, do you have low flush toilets? I said, well, yeah. I said, well, that's really your problem. Because your low flush toilets are actually causing your sewer system to not get cleaned out the way it actually is supposed to. But do I have a choice to put in the bigger gallon flush toilets? No, they've been banned. You don't have the choice to replace your toilets with those any longer. And so that's taken my judgment away from me. The last point in this quote that I started out with was the idea of the right to retain the product of your own effort, to be able to keep what you earn. And I'm going to take the exact opposite point of view, or not point of view, but example of that. I got my master's in real estate from the University of Denver in 1998. The date is important because 98 was before 2001 and before anybody knew what Afghanistan was or what they represented. I took a class called International Real Estate, and we were assigned a country in order to investigate its real estate market, investigate how it works, what its political system was, and what could be done there. Well, the class had been going on for a long time, so France had been taken, England had been taken, Australia, the Ukraine, and what was left but Afghanistan. I spent so much time researching Afghanistan. I found out that they'd been through all of these terrible civil wars, and I could literally find nothing about a real estate market until I came across this small paragraph in an obscure book in the law school at DU that said, Afghanistan is under Sharia law and does not recognize property rights. That's literally all I wrote under the economic and real estate section. Think about living in a place, and this is before the Taliban, this was as they were coming to power. Think about living in a place where you don't know if you own your house because your political system doesn't allow for it. You barely know if you own the flock of sheep that you're tending or if you own your own clothes, because property rights do not exist. Think about that and really let it sink in. If you don't know that you own your clothes, you can barely survive. To go back to the quote that I started with, man cannot live unless he has an unqualified right to his own life, which means an unqualified right to the use of his own mind, to live accordance with his own judgment, to pursue his own values, and to retain the product of his own effort. Capitalism is the system that allows us to do that. Thank you.